All right. Hey, welcome everyone. Second to last day of Indo-Pacific TechNet. Really excited to be up here and chat a little bit about security validation and also zero trust and what Google's been doing. With that in mind, the theme that we have for TechNet this year is free, open, and secure. So with that in mind, we do want to we're going to share some lessons learned. And then go over some potential recommendations that we can see here. Who am I? My name is Andrew Del Rosario. I'm with Google Mandiant. We were acquired about 2 years ago. My primary focus has been offensive cybersecurity operations for the last about 2 decades. Some of my experience has spanned from NSA, been in special missions units, and also been an adjunct cybersecurity instructor for about close to 15 years now, in addition to that, I've also led security engineering efforts with different agencies, and then also focused on leading every service line offering that Mandiant has. So, had the opportunity to also lead some of the SolarWinds investigations when they came up for some of the government agencies, and it's been a pretty good trip. One of the key focuses that I have is as a red teamer and as an offensive operator. I like to think that laziness is a sign of intelligence, so I'm pretty lazy. So what does that mean? I don't want to keep red teaming the same network over and over again and figuring out what they've got going wrong, writing a report on that, super time consuming, and then it doesn't really bring a lot of value to organizations, in my opinion. So with that in mind, we're going to start off by talking about the threat landscape for the Indo-Pacific region, kind of get an idea of what kind of threats that the partners here are going to be facing. From there, we'll jump into some zero trust principles, jump into security validation and how to really align with some of those zero trust principles, and then walk away with some recommendations. All right, so before we start talking about the specific threats that we're going to see here in the Indo-Pacific region, what is a good way to set the tone here? A good way to set the tone would be to look at what conflicts are already happening, and in that case, what's been successful and what hasn't been successful. And the nearest peer that we can look at is going to be the Russian and the Ukrainian conflict. Kinetic warfare there has been used very well. And when you kind of look at the way it's been combined, we've been talking about it for decades in terms of, hey, this is where cyber warfare can go. The earliest paper that I saw on this was back in about, I think it was about 2010, released by U.S. Cyber Command. And one of the things that they mentioned there was this is more than likely going to happen. You're going to see offensive cyber, used in conjunction with things like physical warfare, and then we saw that in the Ukrainian conflict. So how did it start? You're going to see some initial action occurring. You're going to see some the adversary trying to get some initial foothold. Once they're there, they're going to conduct cyber espionage operations. With the cyber espionage operations, they want to get additional information, give them some access to key systems, and potentially expand from there. With this, what they want to do is identify critical infrastructure. Once critical infrastructure is identified, they're going to go ahead and use those as part of some of these, as part of their actual physical attacks. And what we've seen, because this Ukrainian conflict has been happening at this point for about 2 years, or over 2 years at this point, that they're into maintenance, sustainment, and expansion efforts. Thankfully, Mandiant, we have been one of the first, one of the on-ground folks with Ukraine and helping to advise their military and their government in terms of cyber operations. So a lot of that has been very insightful in terms of the raw data and the raw intelligence that we're getting. A little bit about Mandiant, and this is I'm gonna fanboy a little bit over the company that I've been working for 7 years, and that's Mandiant. we did develop the term advanced persistent threat. We did develop the term indicators of compromise. A lot of those have been coined. And then we also released the APT1 investigation. And the industry is really taken off, so it's been great. Now, when we get into the raw intelligence that we're getting and how we're using it, this is everything that you're going to see up here is coming from existing infrastructure, investigations, things that we've analyzed, and the intelligence capabilities that are available at that we use within the teams. It's on par with, in my opinion, intelligence agencies, and that's just coming from that's coming from the space, the intelligence community space. Okay, and we can see this organized. It's always easier to kind of recognize, hey, this is how these adversaries are planning out these missions, these long-term campaigns, and then how they ultimately enable cyberkinetic warfare. So again, we saw the adversary performing initial access, gaining that initial foothold, from there expanding out, and then they use that in conjunction with, no kidding, the actual invasion of Ukraine. And what did they do? They wanted to disrupt communications, they wanted to degrade it, they wanted to shut down utilities, and they were successful in that. So from there, they went ahead and renewed and tried to keep renewing their disruptive attacks. Very successful, and it's a very successful kind of campaign that we've seen there. So go to the next slide. How does that relate to the Indo-Pacific conflicts? Well, if we're going to see what's worked well for some other conflicts, especially in the near term, this is something that more than likely the threats in this area facing our Indo-Pacific partners, it's going to be mimicked, it's going to be replicated, and then we're more than likely going to see it with the nation-state adversaries. They're very good. You have to give that kind of professional, that level of professional respect to some of these adversaries. They're very good at what they do. We're very good at what we do, and then we just got to kind of anticipate what they're going to be targeting. So on the left, you're going to see the Russian equivalent. On the right, essentially a group from the PLA. And what are we going to see here? Some of it's already happening. We see it happening with Taiwan and targeting infrastructure there, targeting systems in terms of setting up what we're calling the lead element. They want to get that initial access. They want to start conducting espionage. They want to start setting up their infrastructure to enable cyberkinetic operations if or when there is some kind of physical attack. So from we'll get into the vulnerability changes into the policy changes. We'll see that how that kind of all enables or plays into the cyber warfare aspect of it. But ultimately, this is a multi-tiered campaign. When we get to hacktivism and IO integration, that is where we're kind of seeing more of the psychological operations, the psychological warfare. That's where you see bots littering the internet, AI videos on YouTube, pushing propaganda, things like that, and that's all combined to really help push an agenda. So with regards to Taiwan, these are some of the actors that we've seen, the threat actors that we've seen targeting Taiwan actively. So the primary thing that you're gonna notice here is that these threat actors, one, they're all Chinese-based. Two, all of these threat actors typically target edge devices. Now, why is that a concern here? Because if we are partnering with different Indo-Pacific organizations, governments, and we're trying to do so at a classification or through some kind of channel that we can kind of really communicate with them on, think sharing cyber threat intelligence, think sharing tippers, sharing different reports. That kind of channel that's going to exist, that would be a huge target. That would be something I would personally try to target. I would do as much open source research as we have, as we can do to identify who to target, who to set up an initial foothold with, and then once they start getting integrated into this Indo-Pacific type of ecosystem, start expanding out from there. So typically we'll see edge device targeting there, and that's going to be key. The same thing with the United States. These are all Chinese-based threat actors. And the most common one we're going to be diving into is going to be Volt Typhoon, which was very active this year in terms of targeting U.S. organizations. So Vault Typhoon, UNC 3236. Now Mandiant calls these groups uncategorized, as there are different levels in terms of naming conventions that we have. If there is a what we're calling an uncategorized group, that means that we've observed similar characteristics in their attacks, but we're not yet confident enough to say this is definitely APT Group 1, this is definitely APT Group 5. We're saying, loosely, we know that they're going to be Chinese or Russian-based or North Korean-based, but we don't know yet that that is definitely the same organization as APT1 or some other group. Now, this is some of the reporting that we've pulled and developed as well. This gives a high overview of what we've seen, and I've seen personally supporting some of the organizations. Some of our organizations is that there will be some kind of edge-based attack that UNC 3236 or Vault Typhoon is taking advantage of. They've exploited, and then from there they've gained access to sensitive data within the network. So the thing to observe with Vault Typhoon, they'll exploit edge devices once they've got access and they're inside the network. They like to use living off the land techniques. So I think it's kind of funny. They'll call it LOL. Have you seen that acronym? So like LOLs. Okay. So they call it living off the land techniques. And what does that mean? They're going to use the tools that are available to everybody that's usually inside that network. So PowerShell commands, host CLI, whatever exists there, they're going to try to use. They're not going to try to bring their malware into there because that's going to set off a bunch of red flags and alerts potentially. They want to use whatever's already built into there. They've been very successful with their campaigns this year in terms of intel gathering. Earlier, we mentioned that there's kind of a multi-tiered approach that's happening when there are these kind of threats occurring here in the Indo-Pacific area. What we saw or what we're anticipating, at least with this, there was a policy change and a regulatory change pushed out in 2021 by the Chinese government. This policy change said that if there is a vulnerability discovered by a Chinese individual or a organization within China, it has to be reported to a specific Chinese agency, a government agency. Why is that bad? Who's the biggest proponent of 0 days and newly discovered exploits? And now you're making it so that if there is a bug bounty program that exists outside of China, and there are some really smart Chinese researchers, they go through, they find a vulnerability, they can now go to jail if they report that to Google for saying, hey, you know what? I found a vulnerability in your system. Or DoD, you have a bug bounty program, I found an issue in your system. They can no longer report that for money. Now they're de-incentivized to report it, and they're not going to want to really participate in that. It has to be reported to the government agency within 2 days of identification. And so that's really giving the Chinese government, a heads up in terms of vulnerabilities that could potentially be weaponized, while giving us and that company further, it could be delays, could be a never notification that happens. So that's where you see policy changes really enabling further cyberkinetic operations. All right, so that was the threat landscape. How do we protect against that, especially in the Indo-Pacific area? The big part, and this is the big buzzword, right? Zero trust. So zero trust. So the nice part, I'm gonna go through this. What is it? It is not one tool. We got a lot of tools here. They all work really well together. It's about figuring out which ones can enable essentially a way to not trust any specific session or network connection that happens inside of your network. And I'll go over a little bit about Google's approach to this and what I've seen. And there's a really good way to implement it. The DoD is innovating, and it is getting there. So what we want to move away from is really that That one, this is kind of a multi-tiered approach, but that big one is stop creating a castle. The castles don't work. We want to authenticate every session. Everybody coming into the castle, everybody going out. Doesn't matter if they've been authenticated before, do it again. Now, where did Zero Trust start? There was something that I remember a few of my mentors previously within Mandiant had mentioned, and that was every time we'd go in and speak with a customer, and this is going back to 2012, 2014, 2015, what we would always emphasize is assume that you've been breached. Don't assume that you're secure. Don't, just assume you've been breached. That same philosophy Google took 10 years before they acquired us, 12 years. And that was because they got breached, or we got breached. So there was Operation Aurora. China targeted Google, and the whole part of it was to be able to identify what Chinese dissidents were saying so that they could be targeted. This is 2009, Operation Aurora, and Google found out, they disclosed it, and then went into clampdown mode. What was the result of that? We reviewed our infrastructure. We reviewed, should we really be using VPNs? How successful has it been in preventing this attack? How successful it will be in preventing future attacks? And redesigned everything to authenticate every session that happens, regardless of where you are in the world. So what that does, when we're looking at it from a holistic perspective, is you have to really get an identity-based authentication, and in this case, do a lot of validation to make sure what you've implemented is actually working. So when Google first published this Zero Trust kind of effort, we went ahead and spoke about it at length, provided architecture documents and everything. That's essentially been the guidelines that the government is now using. And then the government's really taken it and created and built upon it. And now there's different regulatory standards for it. We see it at CISA. CISA has their own Zero Trust framework. DoD is taking it, and it's really kind of progressing from there. And different agencies are taking it. So I'm going to knock on wood here. Since Google's moved into the Zero Trust approach, and I believe the journey for us ended around 2015. Since that's happened, you haven't heard of any wide-scale successful attacks that have been able to access certain databases. Nothing pervasive like that that we're seeing commonly in other areas. I think if you look it up, there will be there was a flaw in Google's social media platform. Was that Google Plus or something like that, or something some defunct product, but other than that, it's been really successful. The biggest difference that I've noticed since Google acquired us, when we were Mandiant, we were constantly having the VPN in, use two-factor authentication, use all of that. We never use VPNs now. We have one system, everything's endpoint-based, and then we connect to our resources, and every session that we have is authenticated. The endpoint has to be authenticated. It's a very successful model. And most of all, from a mobility standpoint, it's helped us a lot. You can pretty much work wherever you want. So with regards to the Zero Trust framework, there are certain pillars that we want to align to. I know there are a ton of companies and a ton of solutions that align to different ones, like identity, data protection. What I believe is the most important, or one of the key areas, and this is coming from an offensive standpoint, is once you develop the strategy to say, hey, this is how we're going to protect yourself, you want to make sure that it's working as intended. That's the key takeaway. There's always going to be a validation piece. Now, with regards to the Indo-Pacific region and some of the partners, we do want to focus on secure collaboration. How do we implement Zero Trust to enable secure collaboration so that partners can share data in a timely and secure way with one another? And that is going to be something that is really easily accomplishable and controlled by Zero Trust type architecture. This is an example of a secure collaboration effort. It doesn't have to be this one product. This right here is a nice way to say, hey, this is how we do it. That isn't the way that you have to do it, though. That isn't the way that the government has to do it, but it is possible, and we are working with organizations in the mainland over here where we're seeing zero trust architectures and networks, and they are very they're working. It's innovative. They're spearheading it. And then the next part is really kind of expanding that foothold so that it's kind of broadly adopted within the DoD. All right, so one of the last sections, as we mentioned earlier, once you have a zero trust type of architecture implemented, and let's say we're sharing files securely to whatever evolution that SharePoint is going to be next. So we want to share a report on a potential Taiwanese invasion or cyber threat intelligence, and we want to share that with Taiwan. How do we get it over to them? How do we get them to share information from a recent breach that they've had over with us? So we implement that architecture. Now we want to make sure if the adversary were to attack this, would we actually be able to identify what's going on? So that's where security validation comes into play. What is this? Mentioned earlier, I'm a red teamer by nature, offensive cybersecurity, either hacking into systems or networks or breaking into buildings. So that's been the primary focus that I've had for about the last 15 years. Now, the kind of key takeaway here is that why do you need me to do that? Why don't you get your security engineer or your analyst, somebody to just hit a button and it launches a lot of those attacks for you, and it lets you know in near real time what your weaknesses are, or if you actually detected those attacks. And that's what security validation is. So what I've been leading a team across Mandiant and then also across Google public sector, where we've been widely deployed across commercial enterprise customers and multiple government agencies. So what we've seen is that there is really not a lot of folks who have bandwidth to do red teaming. And then you get somebody to come in and do a red team, you got to wait 6 months to get them rescheduled. And by that time, your architecture is involved. So we have end-to-end controls testing that's been really kind of successful with the government and also with very large enterprise organizations. Another thing is tools rationalization. So once what I've seen works is a lot of agencies, they'll often have competing EDR solutions, NDR solutions, folks who are saying, hey, my tool is better. So if that's the case, and you're the government, and you're kind of saying, how do I know who's telling me the truth? Why don't you just run the exact same attacks for both of them, and then see which one actually blocks or detects or prevents those attacks more successfully. This is what an example security validation architecture looks like. And again, there are different vendors that do help perform this. So there are options out there, which is really good. But typically, what you'll do is, has anybody participated in Cyber Flag or Cyber Guard, anything like that? So it's a really large exercise. And it happens every year, where you'll have the red team, and then you'll have the blue team, and then you'll have essentially the referees in the middle. The only people who know what's going on all the time, at all times, is the referees. So in this case, with this, when you have a security validation tool in there, it acts as the referee, it acts as the red team, and it acts as a blue team all in one. So that really enables somebody like your security engineers, your SOC analysts, your blue teamers, to be able to be the red team and the blue team at the same time. So one thing to just point out here is that in this ideal situation, we're deployed out in key terrain within the organization. Now, let's jump over to the operator's point of view. We talked about how the architecture looks like, but let's say we want to use and conduct some kind of breach or attack simulation tool. What we're going to do here is the first thing that my team does is looks at the threat intelligence. You don't just want to get a shotgun and then fire it off, or a machine gun and then say, "Yep, it works," right? You want to be very pointed in how you're going to conduct these attacks. So we reference threat intelligence, and then we use it to say this is how we're going to launch these attacks, and then we're going to be very pointed and direct with it. Once we have those use cases, the next thing we're going to do is look at the key terrain, deploy out components, figure out which network segments that we want to be deployed to. And then once we're deployed, in this case, our use case in our threat intelligence was saying, go with Volt Typhoon. Volt Typhoon, very specific to the Indo-Pacific partners, and we want to be able to launch attacks that are going to be relevant to this region. So we pick a Volt Typhoon type of attack, and then you can see some of the tags and everything that do show up in the reporting. And there are numerous attacks in here and actions that are going to be shown. And then imagine that you were the blue teamer or the operator or the security engineer. You don't really need to know how to conduct privilege escalation through PowerShell. You don't need to know how to establish persistence through a host CLI command using a certain version of Windows. All you have to do is select the relevant actors here, and then hit play. At that stage, if you also want additional details on what the attacks are, you click on the attack, and then it gives you that information off the bat, so that you have that fidelity to know whether you should, whether you do want to use that one or not. And then also what's going on is the most important part. All right, so let's say we ran the attack. Now we want to look at the reporting. The biggest part of this is making sure you have evidence to support your findings, to say, hey, you know what? Our firewall rules and our endpoint solutions are jacked up, and we got to reconfigure it, or they're just not working. And then here, you have a data-driven approach to be able to fix that. And green means that your organization detected or blocked it. Red means that it didn't. So really bad. But let's say we want to get additional information and we want more details. We can deep dive into each attack action that was ran, and it has an audit trail for it that does tell you what exactly was ran, how the command was executed, if real malware was uploaded to that system, what the hash was, and whether it was successfully uploaded or not. And then, depending on the action, there is a cleanup process that occurs after that. So all of this to say, it's the exact same things I would be doing as some kind of offensive cyber operator or a red teamer. I would launch certain commands. I would log the host commands myself, and then I would provide it to the customer on request. And also let them know, yes, I was successful or I wasn't. But all of it's captured and really empowers the security engineers to be able to have these kinds of capabilities. So what are some of the outcomes that we've seen? And this is where I can really see this helping out the Indo-Pacific partners. The tension here is getting worse. So it's getting worse. And then the other part is the key terrain. I've noticed, I was chatting with some local Hawaiians lately, or the other day, and they said that there's an influx of military coming in, more so than normal. And pretty normal response, right? We've got increasing tensions here. We're going to assign more personnel. Makes sense. Now, the part that we want to really look at is what have we been able to accomplish over the last few years within the government space, and then also within zero trust networks, such as what we would see here in the Indo-Pacific kind of area. What we've got here on the left is an assessment and a number of attacks that we ran against a zero trust network. Now, we have assessed probably close to a dozen zero trust networks in the last year, in 2024 alone. And these are organizations who are very innovative, and each one has 100% believe that we would be unsuccessful and they would have all greens. That's the initial thought. That's what Google thought as well. What this does, what we found out is that 100% of the organizations that we've assessed have failed the initial assessment. And the reason for that is with Zero Trust, it's very complex. You're implementing it, initially through a POC or a POV, and then you're doing it as a pilot program. So when you run it as a pilot, you have a certain expectation that, okay, this is how everything is going to work. But when it comes down to reality, you start to realize, oh, hey, these sessions can be created from one endpoint to another, and it's not being logged. It's not being prevented. So in this case, what we realized in this customer Zero Trust network is that they failed 100% of the 69 attacks that we launched in there. They weren't detected. They weren't blocked. And then so we worked with this customer and their security engineers to remediate those gaps. The findings on the right, that's an 82% improvement rate. Within about 2 weeks, we also helped them to auto-remediate or auto-contain the attacks. So moved from 100% failure rate to an 82% pass rate within a Zero Trust network. Another primary thing that we focus on, and this is sanitize customers' real-world results, is improvement over time. Doing an assessment by itself, I think is pointless. It's going to give you a snapshot into what works and what doesn't, but what you really want to focus on is how are we improving over time. So within a 2-week gap or within a 2-week period, this does show the green bar on the left is the same attacks that we ran and whether they were prevented or blocked. On the right was the number of blocks that we had 2 weeks later after we worked with these organizations to improve it. Okay, cool. All right, so how would something like this be implemented, especially at a global scale? Now, this is, again, I mentioned Google does this really well. When we first joined the Google family, didn't have VPNs anymore. It was really cool. And then the other big thing was that when we want to share files, everything is super controlled. There's very little concerns with data leakage unless you inadvertently share it with the wrong person. So in this case, when we're talking about some solutions on how to implement this, and we are going more towards a cloud-based solution, you do want some kind of capability that you can deploy on ships, you can deploy on edge areas like planes, and then have that connect back with some kind of centralized land-based area. So that's in this case we've got a tool called GDC, and then those are able to operate in kind of more of the TS level environments, and then connect back to more of a distributed cloud type of capability. Okay. And this is, again, just kind of more of an ecosystem approach to potential file sharing collaboration at different classification levels. So lastly, recommendations for coalition operations. What are we seeing in terms of the trends for the Indo-Pacific area? Our partners like Taiwan, Singapore, Japan. Well, as China, North Korea, Russian-based threats continue to progress, what are we more than likely going to see? There's going to be increased stealth, living off the land techniques, continued attacks against edge routers or edge devices. And then one thing that they're going to do is continue to try to obfuscate where the point of origin is coming from. If there is ever a buildup to some kind of cyber kinetic warfare like we've seen in Ukraine and the Russian threat, one thing that we do anticipate is that there's going to be an uptick in potential traffic where you're seeing kind of two-way data sharing. Could be encrypted, may not be, but it's going to be more of the exfiltration and then the insertion of additional malware. So there's going to be additional traffic that's ongoing at that point. And then lastly, destructive malware. This has been really interesting to see evolve. Destructive malware, when this first came out, everybody just thought, oh, wow, ransomware. These folks want money. But a lot of these nation-state actors, they use it for in a very strategic purpose. They don't want your money. They don't want your Bitcoins. They're going to detonate this when they want to launch some kind of physical attack, or they want to embarrass us. That's going to be the key part. They want to shut down our infrastructure. We saw this with Saudi Aramco when Iran attacked Saudi Aramco, launched ransomware and shut down their oil pipelines. And then we saw that in Ukraine and Russia. So recommendations in terms of the Indo-Pacific arena. What would be the ideal way to implement this? This is something called the pyramid of pain. Has anybody heard of that? Pyramid of pain? No? Is it? Okay. So yeah. So this is taken from threat hunters. The reasoning for this is that everything located at the top, is harder for an adversary or an organization to change, and the closer to the bottom you go, the easier it is for them to change. So if we were at the top and we were looking at an adversary, it would be a lot harder for them to change their tactics, techniques, and procedures. And if we were at the bottom, it would be a lot easier for them to change their malware or the servers that they're operating from. Now, if we take that approach, and what I did was overlay it with essentially a zero trust type of strategy for Indo-Pacific partners, the first thing that a lot of DoD and government organizations are doing is they got to identify what their strategy is first. So they can do that. They can run zero trust assessments against their own zero trust assessments to figure out what their strategy should be, what they should deploy, what kind of tools they should procure. Once they figure out that strategy, the reason that's at the top is because if we screw this up and we make a bunch of procurement decisions after that and they turn out to be wrong, that's going to be super painful. So that's the key one, and usually you have really smart folks setting up essentially the foundation for a zero trust strategy here. Once we get down to implementation, that's where we start working with the engineers. You'll see a lot of the customer and the military engineers starting to work on implementing this, figuring out how to implement things like ICAM, how to implement kind of next-gen firewalls, things like that. And once that's all been implemented, this is where we've primarily started working with with a lot of government organizations, is the validation and remediation piece. So they already have some kind of pilot initiated. They have something that they know or they think is going to work a certain way, and then we run through and then we assess it, and then they fix it within usually a week or two, and they just keep doing it continuously. It's a really good way to really make sure that their implementation is working. Lastly, we get to monitoring and response. That's where the SOC analyst comes in. Those are going to be easier to change at this point. Not the SOC analyst. You don't want to change those. You don't want to change those people out. But the tools themselves, the signatures, whether you have to change any configurations, that's all going to be easier to do at the bottom layer than it is going up and changing strategy and everything like that. Okay, so I'm going to pause here. Oh, I forgot one last one. DoD. This is the big recommendation as well. DoD is moving away from the stick in terms of, hey, you have all these vulnerabilities, and they're moving towards the carrot, which is a great approach. How are they doing that? They're doing it with security validation. They're saying, hey, you're saying you're zero trust? Run these attacks against yourself, show us the report, and then show us how you can improve over time. And they're rewarding the improvement over time instead of saying, we're going to give you a disconnect notice because of this. So it's been very effective. It's been happening for about 2 years now at scale. And it's honestly, it's a very impressive evolution that the government's been doing with a lot of organizations and a lot of military organizations and agencies. All right. So with that in mind, are there any questions that that I can help answer. Cool. Yeah. Good question. Oh, wanna ask that again?
Sure.
A little late. Sorry about that. Sorry. Just had a quick question on the actual use of the security validation. So a lot of red team actions and stuff going on. How do I know that's not going to damage my environment and cause problems? While you're doing that.
Yeah, great question. So, 100% you want to damage your environment and just go complete. No, don't. Different tools, they do have different approaches to this. At least the one that our attacks that happen, they're real attacks. So when they go through, they go through an extensive vetting process to make sure that it's not destructive in that environment. So there are other attacks that will be destructive, like ransomware. Ransomware, you don't just want to launch into your environment. So we have there's going to be a separate tag for that, and you usually want to launch those in more of a protected environment. So if it is successful and it does cause ransomware to execute, it does so in a safe environment that you can revert. That doesn't then start spreading to the rest of your production systems. But that's one part of the answer into the how. The other part is where, kind of where has this worked? And numerous organizations, they are to the point where they're very comfortable running, effectively breach and attack simulation tools, and start off in a lab, and then from there kind of go, sometimes they go prod right away, sometimes they start off in a lab, but it's all kind of the comfort level.
I apologize if I missed the first part, but it seemed like an automated pen testing tool or something?
Yeah, in a way. I like to think of it as, it depends on the use case, but
Okay.
yes.
Does it just use known attack signatures, or is there anything novel? Can it find 0 days?
No, yeah. So for 0 days, you're gonna need a smart person for that, or a smart tool, or some orchestration or automation capability in between, to maybe take like a fuzz or a vulnerability kind of tool and then repurpose it. There are typically known and living off the land techniques that are included in here. And then the other part is at least what we've done in the last year with some of our customers is develop tailored attacks based on threat intelligence and indicators that they were receiving, and then repurpose it as an attack they can use. Good question. Yeah. All right. Well, hey, thank you very much. Thanks for coming, and hope you have a great day, Mahola, I think.